Hey everyone, we're back on The Reckoning here on the Real Talk Radio Network. And I am looking forward to, I know Mr. Andrew Riddaugh is calling in, emailing back and forth with him right now, so we should have him any moment here. But we're going to continue on with this topic. There is a great demand and an outcry of accountability over this. We have every which way going: congressional accountability, Secret Service accountability, all the demands of it. And, as much information is flying around, I know that there are a lot of good folks out there with good sources. And we've seen some of them talking this week at the RNC, Dan Bongino and a lot of others that are not just blowing smoke into the internet, but know things. I am greatly excited here to talk to Mr. Andrew Riddaugh about this. If you're not familiar with him, he is the CEO of Liberation Technology Services. It's a company that's out on the front of private cloud hosting, groundbreaking cybersecurity solutions, and a lot of really neat things there. But he was with the executive office of President Donald J. Trump, a key figure with the Presidential Advance Team, and oversaw hundreds of presidential trips, including international trips. So Andrew's got a lot of insight that we don't normally get to hear from. I'm really excited to have him come and talk because he's got some thoughts about what we saw this past weekend, and he's on with us now. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, sir. Thank you, and I appreciate your time being with us and the information. I know that you've got a lot of a very busy schedule and a lot of things going, but I think that you're, as we have so much information and yet so little, what should I say, wisdom on this subject, this shocking event that we saw over the weekend, I'm very grateful for people who come out with knowledge, prior knowledge, and are ready to talk to people about this and help us kind of process and clarify and focus our demand for accountability in the right direction. So, you know what, with your history, why don't you just give us what was your takeaway? What was your instant takeaway from the weekend? I'm sure you saw the news like everyone else and went into process mode, but with more context. What was your first takeaway from it, what we saw Saturday in Butler?
Utter disbelief and shock, right? So, I've produced over 300 of these types of events, traveling ahead of the president and then producing the actual events. And, almost immediately my phone began to light up from many of my former colleagues because we all know, and putting on these events, you're there days, if not a week or two ahead of time, going through, the security perimeters, mitigating line of sight, mitigating all of these different things. And something so blaringly obvious as a building 150 yards away to not be secured is incredibly interesting. But then, obviously the facts begin to come out, and, it's obvious that, the Biden DHS and Secret Service was, withholding resources from President Trump. And now as we learn more, they were well aware that there were threats, but did not act accordingly. And I think that it is incredibly concerning to see how, the front runner, the very soon to be official nominee for the Republican Party and, the leader in this campaign and in this race, how little resources he was being given.
Yeah, absolutely. And now here's a question, and you have a very unique perspective for me on this one, because I know I've been looking at a lot of, fairly credible folks online talking about this, but you were not only part of the White House staff, the travel manager. I know you were a senior advance representative during President Trump's time in office as the sitting president of the United States, but you also worked on the 2016 campaign. So this would have been not the sitting president, but a campaign or a candidate in the middle of a campaign. Can you give me some insight on, is there a difference? I'm assuming that there is, and I've heard a lot of folks agree with this, but not with authority, that there really is a difference between the sitting president of the United States traveling and having a security perimeter at an event and a candidate or a former president and the detail that they get. Is there really a significant difference there, or are we so far into the campaign there shouldn't be? I'm kind of curious if you could, give some insight to me on that one.
Yeah, yes and no. You have to really take into account that this is an election cycle unlike many in the past, right? You have a former president that is running again when he is not consecutively sitting. And so it's a very unique situation. So you're not wrong. Normally, when you are a first-time general nominee, you are given a Secret Service detail as you kind of come into that official front-runner, presumptive or named kind of position. And it is normally a lighter footprint. Normally, those individuals do not necessarily have the same kind of security or threats against them. Whereas President Trump, it's a very unique situation because he is actively running again, and he is a former sitting president. And so it does not necessarily go in kind of the same manner as President Obama or the Bushes, where they were at a much slower pace. They were not running for re-election. They were primarily doing speaking engagements. Whereas President Trump, as we know, he's doing massive events multiple times a week to tens of thousands of Americans that want to hear directly from him. And so, now even coming out with the credible and verified threat from Iran that Secret Service acknowledged, the resources that were given to President Trump, not only just because the type of events that he's putting on, but because there were active, valid threats, the security protocol should have been much higher. It should have been tighter. And all assets that the team on the ground is requesting should have been granted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things, I know we're seeing, obviously, this was the C team, I guess we could say, the third string of Secret Service protection. I know there's a lot that we've seen corroborated that some of them were moved off. Jill Biden was in the area. Some of them were filled in with different temporary or other DHS agents who this was not presidential protection, is not their primary thing. But here's one specific. I know that we have a lot of questions about that building, which, again, just to me as a novice, but as a prepared citizen that pays attention to my surroundings, that building in this situation where you're primarily looking for a shooter, a gun, this is what someone's going to use to try to attack this person and successfully assassinate a sitting, a political leader. That building is an obvious hole in the perimeter around this place where the stage is. I know we have a lot of questions, and it seems some pretty serious ones that someone was supposed to be posted on the roof but wasn't. Someone was in the building. They had seen this guy and had talked about it. Police even saw him over the building and had to duck back down, radioed in. But am I correct in understanding from something I think you said earlier this week, was in fact the Secret Service stand down order or a hold order? Is that a reality? Because I'd seen a lot of it, but I'd never seen it corroborated. And I wondered, is that actually something that happened? Do we have confirmation on that they were told to stand down and wait?
Well, obviously, if it is a counter sniper, kind of situation, they want to be absolutely sure that before they pull a trigger and potentially end a life, that it is a credible threat. Part of the information that I've seen out there is that, the counter sniper team might have been partially obstructed by a tree in between them and the building. So, it is not that uncommon to see a police officer, a security official pop out of a random door or into an area that you're not expecting them to be in. So it's something that we see quite often, and maybe that's because, they're investigating a suspicious person, or they're trying to get a better view of the president. So, you don't want to just necessarily immediately pull the trigger. I think that another big piece of this is the fact that more or less the Secret Service announced or confirmed that they had been understaffing President Trump's detail. Now, I know many of the individuals that are on there, right, the shift, the team that is closest to him, and those are a team through and through, but then you have to augment as you go out in the security perimeters, because it works in almost rings that start at the stage and progress outwards. It relies on, folks from the Secret Service that are being called in from other field offices all the way to local law enforcement and resources. So I think, more than anything, there is a issue of understaffing and poor resources and potentially not enough time to do the appropriate advance if, the Secret Service assets are being stretched too thin, which, mind you, since the Obama administration, because they are really pushing a lot of DEI and other kind of initiatives that don't necessarily play into the day-to-day responsibilities of Secret Service, their numbers have been below what is required. And so the agents that are there are extremely overworked, and there's not really a great answer to how are they going to get those numbers up so that they can have fresh and sharp agents on post. They're not coming off of a 12-hour shift, the night before. And I think that there's a lot of critical failures that we've seen as a result of Saturday's events.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I appreciate, too, the clarification there, because, again, there's so many sensationalizing headlines that come out. I look at everything and say, hold on, I need this to be verified before I'm even going to suggest it or ask. But you open the – well, let me – if you don't mind, let me go in the last couple minutes here. You open the door to it. The DEI practices of almost every executive agency are on full display right now. It's not shocking to me that this is affecting everything from recruitment to the actual enactment of the role of each of these agencies. But one thing that I want to get your take on, it looks like a U.S. Secret Service director began to give statements, and then that, even it signaled she was willing to come before the House Oversight Committee, and that seemed to be abruptly stopped. And she's getting instructions, at least it appears, from the Secretary of Homeland Security, stop talking, don't go any farther. If you want to keep your job, don't talk about it. And all of a sudden, they're stonewalled from the DHS level down. Do you have any insight on that or any thoughts about what we're seeing and how accountability is going to come with or without their willingness to help?
Yeah. So, I think that it is pretty obvious that the Biden administration policies are failing, every single American here. And it is just more or less the same that we are seeing from Secretary Mayorkas, where they are unwilling to acknowledge that their policies are putting lives in danger. Mm-hmm. And so, until they start taking accountability, now I know several committees have already issued subpoenas for Secret Service, the director, to appear. But, I don't really believe we'll get to the full bottom of this until Republicans control both chambers and they can operate, without obstruction from this current administration. And, it's incredibly sad because this situation is of their own making. You have top Democratic officials saying someone needs to stop Trump. They'll take him out behind the gym and beat him up. They're talking about putting a target on his back. And then, mind you, the mainstream media, a lot of these technology companies are amplifying this and also not allowing for alternative narratives to talk about the good things that President Trump does. And so you have this kind of situation where you have a more or less uninformed population, some with, severe mental health issues that, they're not addressing because they're trying to say it's the new norm. And so what do you expect? The other terrifying thing is less than 48 hours later, we get reports that there is a individual just outside of the convention with a firearm concealed. Right. So clearly this is something where their political narrative is creating this situation and, individuals are acting upon that type of rhetoric.
Yeah. The one way or another, there is accountability to be had, and the Biden administration is complicit in this, whether they're the ones that pull the trigger or they're the ones that fan the flames of hatred and division against Trump and his supporters, and then they just kind of pull back the protective hand or hamper it in some way. There is responsibility there to be had that we got to lay on them. I appreciate you so much. Let our folks know where they can find you and keep up with your work. I know you're in a different field now, but it is nonetheless important.
Yeah, we're helping people get away from Google and Microsoft and all those big technology companies. You can find us at liberationtek.com.
You got it, liberationtech.com. I saw that. Ditch Microsoft and Google today. You're doing the Lord's work. We got to get rid of them. Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate your perspective on this. Have a great afternoon.